So, Kaz workshop today is about pruning pines. So, at this time of year, we're in September, coming up to the end of September, and Kaz is going to go through and explain to us how we would prune a pine to encourage back budding for next year. So we've got quite a few trees.
Right, you've got to wire absolutely everything.
Fine. I've come prepared. Look, that's mine. I've come prepared.
Is that my cup of tea? I think?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Right. Hey, you've been playing bondage with it. Look at it.
You did that.
I didn't.
She did.
I can't ever remember putting that bit on. Did I
Yeah.
do that?
You didn't do that bit, that little thing.
Oh, that's maybe what.
But all I did was put that in there just to keep it off.
To keep it off the bar. Right, so let's have a little look. It's definitely going in the right direction, mind, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't want masses of wire on, to be fair. Don't worry, I'm just winding you up. I think it's a good time of the year to start fiddling on with pines. Now, blacks and reds, I've found that the needles kind of keep growing long after Scotties and Mugos have matured.
Right.
So they can still be fairly easily pulled out, but it feels like there is a bit of resistance there, so they're not too bad. You can often tell the very base of the needle, you can still see on that one a little bit, and you see it's a lighter colour to the rest of the needle, and that generally means that the tree's still pushing water into it, so they're a bit too easy to be knocked out. So I think one of the first things to do is you need to start taking some of the needles off it, the old needles off it.
Yeah.
And then to balance the growth, because you can see this is a little bit of a hedgehog going on here, you know, it's quite dense. Just always remember to look at your tree and identify which are the strong areas, which are the weak areas, and then act accordingly. If it's left too long, the weak areas are going to get weaker, the strong areas are going to get stronger. So you need to remove some of those needles in the strong areas to balance that growth pattern out.
Right.
So just kind of looking around the tree. I don't think there's anywhere particularly weak. There's a little cluster there that could do with a little bit of length to that. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And obviously this one here is a little bit kind of weak there, so you don't want to be taking any needles off that. If that is, we need to keep it, we may actually dispense with that because it is quite close along that primary branch to the trunk. You know, because remember you should be able to see a good amount of the trunk, the branch, before you start to get to the foliage mass. But you don't want to see so much where you go branch, but right here. Yeah. And then there's a pom-pom of foliage on the end. You need them workings along here, right the way along here. You want to be able to pull around some of the foliage to hide some of that. Mm-hmm. So your first job is to start taking out some of the needles, and I would start with this little fella down here, right? Says the guy with the most annoying turntable in history. So you see how you've got, like, even on this little twig here, you've got a bud back here, you've got a bud there, right? Try to put the definition. Now you might, if you want to use scissors, that's fine, because sometimes if you pull the bark off, or you pull buds off. So whatever's easier for yourself. Red pine and black pine, obviously, you can actually cut the needles on these and they'll be fine. Not like Scotties and Mugos, where the needle will die completely back. You can see where it's been cut before, and you just get a little brown bit on the end. And it looks like the needles, you've got it really good because the needles are quite short here. Yeah. Now, I think it will push a little bit, and I do think they will get marginally longer, but not that much. So there's no kind of buds there. So just cut them back. Make that...
Just how far back are you cutting them?
So I'm leaving that bit there because there's a, is there? No, I'm not. Don't pay any attention to me. So what I'm kind of doing is I'm leaving the bulk of this year's needles.
Yeah.
And obviously if you've got a bud back here, right, make sure there's some good needles on it. Just maybe take 1 or 2 off of the older ones around the base, right? But one of the key things that you're doing here is you're making this bit of definition along here, right? Because eventually it'll want wiring and everything, you'll get nice bit of space, nice bit of air and light through there to get buds popping along here to get a bit more fullness, but then all of that lot will start to sit and we'll get a nice neat foliage pad with, more importantly, all the buds pointing up to the lights to get a real big bit of strength in the tree. So you see there's a bud there, can you see there, and there's just a couple of needles on that. You see what I mean? There's just a little bud in there, so that's fine. If you have any buds that come from the underside, take them off.
Yeah.
You know, there's no point in having them there. So it's just a case of just thinning out. Just before you do it though, just do a little assessment of how strong each particular twig is, i.e. how good the needles are on the end and how good the bud is in the end as well, right? If it's a blind bud and it's a blind bud but you've got some buds back here but they're not particularly strong, you've still got the needles there to act as the magnet for the sap to go back and forwards. So don't take so many needles off just to help pump some energy into them buds further back, right? So that's your first job, is to start to thin out that there. But just as you move up the tree, see this section here is a little bit weaker, so don't take anything off that. Don't take anything off that. But the buds are good in the end, and I think I would not take anything off that. When it comes to the spring and the candles are starting to elongate, just be aware of what you're doing with it. Obviously this is a double flush pine, so you can cut the buds out completely and get a double flush. And yes, you can in the UK. A lot of people say, oh, you can't with red pines and black pines. You can. You sometimes have to alternate it in the years to get some time off. But honestly, they're really quite happy to get a double flush. A lot of the time you see on the internet things about, oh, well, I do it in June. You know, the Japanese do it in June. The people in California and in Spain and Italy do it in June, but the difference there is they've got the weather, they've got the guaranteed weather, and they've got the heat and the kind of nice bright sunshine, which is what blacks and reds really like. We haven't got that. You know what it's like here. It's grey and miserable most of the year.
I've been this bloody year.
And so the trees, you've got to adapt what you do with them to fit in with our growing condition. So if you've had the tree, if it's had a year off, which I think this one has this year, as in from candle cutting or decandling, I think you might be able to get away with doing a bit decandling on it next year, but assess the growing situation with the tree, right? If it doesn't throw candles out particularly strongly, like next year, and you need to feed it well, right? Feed it well now, and as soon as the buds start to swell a little bit in the spring, feed. Get the energy, get that engine growing, which is unlike my bloody van. So get that engine going in the tree, and it'll really push, and that'll get some built-up energy in it for then you to come along and chop the candles out later on. But what I generally do is, on a tree of, say, this sort of size, and it does matter on the size, this sort of size and bigger, I would do my decandling in about mid-May.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you've got to give the tree time to recognise, I haven't got them buds anymore. I need to
Some
make
new
some
ones.
new ones. I need to elongate them candles again, and then I need to split the needles off, let them needles grow and mature. And if you leave it too late in our season, in our growing year, well, you just haven't got the time. So if you do it in June, and I have seen it done with people where they have done it in June, and then they get to this time of the year, and the needles are this big, and they're too small on a tree like this.
Right.
Now, if it's a really well pushed on showing, or Marmay black pine, by all means, cut the candles in June, because then you will get nice little needles like that, right? But I would just start thinking about it if the tree's asking for that, to do it in about mid-May. If it's really strong, you can't actually do it a bit later, because then you're wasting some of the tree's energy, which you want to do. You want to waste some of the tree's energy, so that you get the smaller needles a little bit later on.
Right.
But if it's looking a bit kind of, do it a little bit earlier, right?
Yep.
I know it's difficult to gauge our weather as well. It's like, what's it going to do this year? You just don't know.
Don't start the day.
Right, hang on, I'll go back round here, because this looks like the front of the tree.
Yeah.
Right, so give us a little bit of history about this tree, and what's your plans and your thoughts for it?
This tree was probably collected about 20 years ago
Right,
up out of Amsley Forest. It was grown in the allotment for a few years, and it was put into a box, and it's been in a pot, and in probably the past 5 years it's been in this pot.
right,
Over the years all I've done is put like pads into it to get a bit of shape to it, but it's looking a little bit too wide at the moment for me.
marginally. We can maybe shave a bit off this
And
foliage
it's
part
just,
here.
just a case of like sort of pushing everything back in,
Yeah.
tidying it all up, and getting some better shapes into the pads.
Right, my first thought, it's a brilliant tree, honestly, it's a lovely piece of material, but my first thoughts when I've seen it is, there's a few of these kind of funny branches that are doing this, that are crossing over the trunk, right?
Yeah.
So,
Now, there's reason why I did that.
right,
See this big bit there? Big long
yeah,
straight
yeah,
bit, which
so
they
that-
tried to hide that as
right,
much as anything.
right. So I think some of the things we need to think about doing is, the trouble is though, you've done that and you've hid that, but
Yeah.
you need something to hide this.
We've tried that now, yeah, it's like
Do you know what I mean?
you're paying one off against
I know,
another,
I
aren't
know.
you?
So I think one of the first things you need to do is, you're quite right with the width of it, but the width of it where it's too wide is this side. This foliage pad is a bit big. It's a bit of a mono pad, right? Now, it's a big tree, but I just feel it just wants to kind of come back. Remember what we spoke about when we just need to take off some of these,
The leggy bits
the
at the
bits
end.
at the end to try to pull it in. So some of that lot there, you see how it's wider there?
Yeah.
If you just take off some of that there, that pulls it in a bit, right? So some of that lot even further, I'm just having a look, so maybe it's that whole branch at the end there, that can come off. Because obviously we don't want to take it too far in,
No.
so that you're going to lose that nice shape, because even some of these want taken back a little bit. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, we need to take away some of them sections there, right? Maybe, I know you're taking the wire off, we're going to have to put a little bit more wire on.
I'll take the wire off and cut off what we know,
Yeah.
we know we don't want.
Yeah, and
And
then
I'll
get stuck in.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at this branch here, because this is quite wide as well, and I'm wondering whether it is more feasible if we pull around some of this to hide this section
Yeah.
a little bit. You don't want to hide all of it.
I just, when you see it all, it's too...
Yeah, it's too much.
Too
It
much,
is,
yeah.
I think you definitely want to kind of see some of this bit, but if
Yeah.
you pull some of that round and drop it a little bit, it's going to hide that bit
Yeah.
there. And then I think you can dispense with that foliage part, right?
20 years grown that.
She comes along and
I totally agree with you, yeah.
you know what I mean? So, because that's a little bit contrived,
Yeah,
and I get what you've done, and that's fine. And I think this one here, I think instead of you pulling it around that way, I think it wants to go that way a little bit. Because remember, try not to cover your trunk up too much until you start getting a fair way up the trunk, right?
Yeah.
And then remember, try not to get the green hat.
the green helmet.
Aye, the green helmet
Yeah.
on the top, because it is getting a little bit helmety here,
Yeah,
right? So, again, we need to kind of can be maybe raised up a little bit so it's a bit more in keeping
Yeah.
with that, and maybe just lift that one a little bit and pull that one up over there, so that you've got, and the way I call it is you've got your silhouette of your outer triangle, right? As the tree steps up like that, and remember you've got this inner triangle, so you've got the edge of your foliage pad, which at the minute is there,
yeah.
right? If that's kind of moved here, that's moved, that's pulled forward and moved over, and you would get the edge of that to the edge of that to the edge of that, and then to there, to there, to there, and you
Yeah.
get an inner triangle which draws your eye in, it sees the trunk. You don't want it too high. If it's
No.
too high, it doesn't look right. So, but I think the very top of your inner triangle kind of wants to be within this vicinity here.
Round the
Right.
round there,
Yeah,
somewhere,
yeah. So, carry on what we've taken some of the wire off that you need to. We'll get a little bit of pruning done on it because there is too many branches
Oh, yeah.
on it now. We need to kind of thin it out a little bit. How long's it been in here?
It's second year.
It's pretty solid. It's put on a lot of flipping root like. Now it has got some really small needles, right? That's one of these things that people go, wow, the small needles on that. But sometimes you need to ask yourself the question, why are they that small on a big tree like this? And I think it might want a repot again, right? It might want, because sometimes some trees they just can't go crackers and they just fail. I have noticed also on it that there is a bit of sooty mould.
A bit of what?
Sooty mould,
All right.
right? There's a little bit of black fungal. Now the sooty mould itself doesn't do any harm to the tree, right?
Right.
What it does do though is it stops its ability to photosynthesize because it's blocking out the light getting
Yeah.
to the needles. But there's a reason the sooty mould's on there, right? And the sooty mould generally clings to honeydew, which is the poo of aphids,
Right.
right? So you've either had or you've still got an aphid problem,
Right.
right? In which case the aphid problem needs sorting first. But the sooty mould, I wouldn't bother with a fungicide for the sooty mould. It's not that bad. It'll
Yeah.
just get washed off eventually. And I'm just having a look to see. There's an insect there. You see there's a.
Oh, hello, yeah.
You see its little legs feeling around.
Another one.
Yeah, the little bastards.
Aye.
So that's what's happening. It's got aphid. So just kind of look for a lot of these clues. The black sooty mould. Does the tree have wasps flying around it quite frequently? Because that's sometimes what they're after.
Oh, right, that makes sense, because, yeah, in the summertime, sometimes there's a lot of wasps about.
Aye, so because obviously the wasps are getting to the time of the year where they're going to die off.
Yeah.
So that just frantically looking for something to eat. But they do go after aphids, because I'm often looking on some of my trees and I know there's some wasps hanging around there. And I'll go and investigate, and lo and behold, there's, you get them grey aphids that line up along the needles.
Yeah.
Aye. So tackle that. How you want to tackle that is there's obviously insecticides. Yeah, I would only use kind of insecticides if there's a real must for it, right? Some people try to blast them off with water. There is more organic ones on the market that you can try and use to get rid of them. You know, but we had a really good talk at ours about a guy who's selling this stuff, humic acid, fulvic acid, calcium, amino acids and stuff like that you mix in and you water on, and he was explaining exactly how each thing, what it does for the tree and how the tree it unlocks certain kind of things that get locked up in the growing medium, and it's better for the tree and all the rest of it. It was a little, the first time hearing it, it was a bit over my head. He's a guy called Scouse Sean. I hope, you know, obviously I'm mentioning him in Gail's film in there. He was absolutely brilliant with his talk, and some of the products he's bringing out is brilliant. So there's him with his products, and then there's obviously Karen, the lady from Ireland who did Pro Biocarbon. Some of her stuff's brilliant as well. So there's the Danu that gets the bacteria into the soil, and it helps the trees kind of almost fight these kind of things themselves. And she also produces a fungicide, Maru, which is good for some of these, like Phomopsis tip blight and needle cast, which has been really bad the last couple of years, needle cast, because of the wet weather we've had here. And they're more beneficial to the tree because they're gentler, they're not chemical. And I would kind of really start to push some of them type of products that are actually better for the tree. But keep an eye out all the time for any little signs, because if an infestation of certain things gets over the top, your tree can start to, and that also might have something to do with why the needles are a little bit smaller this year. It's the trees kind of, you know, because obviously they're sap sucking insects.
Yeah.
One of the worst ones, I suppose, is red spider mite. I very much doubt that's what this is. Things like spruce are more prone to getting red spider mite. Red spider mite is probably not quite as bad at the minute because of the wet weather, and they hate the wet weather. Keep an eye on all your, any little signs, wasps, sooty mould and all of that type of thing, and then investigate. Right, so start to take off this at the minute, or carry on with your wiring and start to take off some of that lot there. We're going to take some of the edge off that, but before you take the outer edge off that, undo the guy wires here, right, and pull this branch forward a little bit if you can, and try to hide the section here that you're not happy with, and I totally agree with you, but this bit's fine.
Yeah.
And then take that bit off and start getting everything just sat nicely, right? Have you had any thoughts about the front of this tree at all?
I have not. I'm open to anything you suggest.
So I'm just turning it round. I'm not like it's got a couple of problems.
Yeah.
Right? One of the problems is obviously the main trunk, this one in the middle.
It's very straight,
it's quite
isn't it?
straight, right? And this bit here, which you kind of feel, well, that's going to be the apex of the tree.
Yep.
Which you could, right, well, that's fine. But the trouble is, these trunks here, particularly this one, if we could have cut that off and stuck it round there, it would have been champion.
Yeah.
Because obviously that thin one is a back trunk.
Yeah.
It adds depth. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
See how that adds depth?
Yeah.
Right, so what we're going to do, how we're going to tackle this. Right, now we can still utilise that as an apex. We can certainly bend that forward to her a little bit, because I think it's going to be more difficult to use that as the front, right?
Yeah.
Because of this. Another thought would be to remove that. But I think it's a bit of a shame because it's a nice clump. It's a bit different. Another thought is to look, what can we make an apex somewhere else on here? Can we lift this and form an apex and make the tree a little bit lower? Because there's obviously, I don't know if the tree's had an issue in the past, but it looks like maybe some bits have died off on it in the past. It could be that it's been done purposely, but
I don't know the history of it, you know, I've just got it like this, so, you know.
Right. Right, so let's just have a look at what's going on. A lot of these branches are quite straight,
Yeah.
you know. That's definitely movable, right? Again, a bit of rebar would have been useful. So that might be something we could definitely do at some stage. We could put a bit of rebar in there and kind of pull that forward, rather than putting some really massive thick wire on. We could do that, but it would need to be raffia-ed, because you see, whenever you've got a bit of dead wood going up a branch like that, there is quite a strong possibility that can snap.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It's probably more likely to snap if it was going the other way, but the fact that it's coming up is a little bit more in its favour. So I would utilise this as the front, right? Obviously, we need to put some definition in the foliage parts. Just looking at the health of the tree, the health looks pretty good. It's not too bad.
It's shed a lot of needles, so I've got rid of all the yellow ones, but it shed an awful lot this year.
But the new growth on it looks quite good, and the buds in for next year look okay, and it is actually back budding.
Yep.
You can see there's a little bit of back budding there. So I think today we'll obviously get the front completely sorted, and it's not kind of there, because if it's there, that trunk at the back's getting blocked out a little bit. It makes that look wider there, but we know that that's a separate trunk, and we need to kind of see that. So the front just needs to come around there a little bit. What you don't want with trunks, and it's the same with forests, group plantings, is you don't want everything the same gap in between. You don't want even gap, even gap, even gap. And the same with the trunks. Everything wants to be different thicknesses. So turning that around like that, so the gap there is a similar sort of thickness or width to the gap there. And this gap here is a similar to that there. Doesn't kind of work. It's that symmetry type thing. Nothing in nature is symmetrical. So we have to kind of do that with our bonsai as well, just to give it more of a natural kind of feel. So just having this slightly off front where the pot is, just here, I think would benefit a little bit more, just so you definitely can see that trunk. There's a thinner gap at the back, and that gives it a bit more depth. First tasks to do is you're going to have to thin it out a little bit more. It's a little bit kind of clumpy in places.
That's why I thought that's what my task today was, to thin it out. So it's a bit of advice, you know, which bits should I thin out?
Well, again, it's a case of looking at each one in turn and thinking which one of these are strong and which one are weak, right? I don't think there's anything on it that's overly weak. That little branch in there possibly is a wee bit weak. And you see, it's very important that this sort of thing's done, because this trunk here is in the foliage mass that's kind of left on there, because you can see where some stuff's died off here. But what's left is kind of grown back into the tree, and it's got an overhang of this lot. Now, fortunately, the gap between there and there is enough that the light is still going to get through. But if you were to not do anything with that and get a bit of wire on that and pull that down, that gap's going to significantly change. And then this section here might suffer, and it would be a shame to actually lose this trunk. So first things first, I think, is identify the strong areas.
Yep.
And you can see this is definitely strong. That's strong up there. That's quite strong. That's quite strong. So instead of doing the bottom areas, which are a little bit weaker, on kind of group workshops where obviously time's limited and you're kind of rushing around and trying to get everything done, as I say, identify them strong areas and work the strong areas first.
Yep.
Because if you can't get everything you want done on this workshop today, as in thinning out that foliage,
Yep.
what generally happens is, and I know people have lives, they're not sad gits like me and bonsai's my entire life and it's all day bonsai, bonsai, bonsai. People have lives, they've got work, they've got family and all the rest of it. And they go home and they put the tree to one side, and then it's weeks later before they manage to get it in and carry on. So if you've thinned out because people often start at the bottom and work their way up. If you started on the weak areas at the bottom, you've just weakened that more. I mean, okay, a couple of weeks is not going to make either here or there, but sometimes they can be left. I've known people leave them for months on end, and that can have a significant effect. So start on the strong bits and thin out the strong bits first. Yep. And then you know you've done it the right way around, and if you can't finish the whole tree in the day or in the next couple of weeks or so, you haven't weakened that area and put more strength in the strong area. Because you need to do it the other way around. Right, these areas up here. And just leave the bottom sections at the minute. And if you do get all of this done today, we'll come back to them.
When we're going to thin these out, are we actually going to leave the buds on, or are we going to prune those back? Or leave?
You do not want to be taking any buds out. White pines are not like Japanese black and Japanese red. It is not a tree that you want to be decandling.
No.
And it is not the time of the year to be trying to do any form of candle pinching. What you can do is, obviously, if there's any lignified twigs and stuff like that, it's too long or it's too clumpy, yes, you can prune some of them out, but you must make sure you've got good, viable needles and buds further back along the twig that's going to take over. And what I mean by that is, say, if you've got this section here, I'll try to push that lot out of the way, you've got this section here, you've got a good magnet, a sap magnet here, right? You've got a little bud there and a little bud there, and you might think, and you've got another little bud here, and you think, right, I want to push that back. What I'm going to do, I'm going to force that one to come away, I'm going to prune that off, right up to here. That is not strong enough on its own at present to be able to have the magnet for the sap to that. Right, that's not a particularly good bud in the end. The needles are not particularly that strong. So it's one of them things you'll need to do in stages. So don't get a little bit too trigger happy with your scissors and chop, 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 chop. Have a look and see what the tree's giving you. Is there good buds on the end? Is there good needles? Can I prune that back? It's like this bit here. You've got a twig here and you've got a twig here. You may want to go, right, how's that sitting? How's it going to sit with the rest of the tree? I can cut that off because that bit here is good. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But I can't cut that off and expect that to take over, because it won't.
Right.
It's not strong enough. And that sort of thing you just need to bear in mind as you're going through the tree. So what you're going to be doing is, you see the old needles behind the new needles. Even though there's a good bud there, the new needles are only from there out over. Do you see? Can you see the slight change in colour of the needles from there out over? From there back over is last year's needles. And what I would do there is, because there's not so many needles on the end where the new needles are, right? You're plucking some of these needles off. I would leave some of last year's needles, right? So I would leave a clump somewhat like that, particularly white pine in this country, right? And then when it's wired, tip that up to the light, we'll get some nice neat foliage pads, and the buds are all going to get nice and healthy, right? So what you need to do is you need to be removing some of these old needles, but just be aware, how good is the bud in the end? How good are this year's needles? If it's a really, really strong one, you can probably take off all of last year's needles.
Okay.
But if it's not so strong and there isn't so many needles on the end, leave some of last year's as well.
Yeah.
Right? Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've had it in garden and I've looked, I've tilted it,
Uh-huh.
and I've always thought that this just, it's just wrong. It just goes in wrong, you know. Doesn't go away any flow, it comes again it to try and go back. I think somebody's tried to whack it in the past.
But I'm not dead. I'd have to charge about £200.
One of the things about the whole tree that jumps out at is it's too wide.
Yeah.
Right? And this is what I often find with a lot of trees, is they're often too wide. And to make this look more powerful,
Yeah,
right, you need to bring them in.
yeah.
Right. Now, we could get this to work like this, right, but it would mean if we're going to keep this section,
Yeah.
that would have to go,
Yeah.
right? So, I'll turn this round to you.
Oh, Carmichael was asking me.
Right. And can you just imagine the tree?
Yeah, and then you bring these
You bring some of that
down
down,
into the...
right? It's a bit more open, it's a bit more compact. That lot on that side comes down and the apex is in a better place.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of one way of doing it. What we can do though, I know you see you're not so keen on some of that, we can hide it.
Right, yeah.
Right. We can manipulate some of these branches here. One or two of these are a bit long, but we can manipulate some of them so that we're not going to hide
Oh,
that bit there, because that bit there is quite nice, but it's that bit.
yeah.
That's that straight bit there, right?
So would you remove that branch completely, or would you gin it, or are you pulling it down, or what are you doing?
I would possibly gin it to begin with. The only trouble is you've got a one here, but then
I'm not being funny, but I think I would...
what I would kind of think of a little bit is maybe that one's in a better position than that one is, and we could remove that one, or at least kind of make a really, really
Yeah, I mean,
stumpy one.
if that one was removed, it wouldn't leave as big a scare there as what taking that yen off.
Yeah, the only thing about having
You need
that
that big of man, Sam.
gin there is it does just distract from that big lump at the back. But my thought is not to have the front here, but a bit more here, so it gives you a bit more width at the base of the nabari. You can see that bit of dead wood here. You've got a bit more movement in there, and it hides that little bit at the back.
Yeah.
So you're always looking to emphasise the good parts of your tree and hide the flaws,
Yeah.
right? And all trees have them,
Oh, yeah.
you know.
True.
So if I'm being honest here, I think this is probably what I would tend to do with this tree, because coming back to it and kind of what was it, it's all a bit long, that, isn't it? You know, as much as we can put some bends in that and make, it's still a bit long, and I just feel like without that, and manipulating some of these around and put a bit of definition in there,
Yeah.
you've got a better tree, and we can hide a lot of this at the end here, right? There's a little too much going on in there. There's one or two bits that can definitely come out, and we can,
Yes, there is a bit of thickness.
yeah, we'll probably take some of the
Whereas we've got some smaller.
length off that
Yeah.
and manipulate some things around there,
Yeah.
and just hide a little bit of that bit there. Because as a bonsai artist, it's kind of your job to hide the flaws a little bit,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Because, I mean, the other option would be to either cut that off or gin it
Yeah.
completely. But what I don't like about that option, right, is you've still got a very long branch here.
Yeah.
You've got this big lump at the back, and however much you move some of these around, it's going to be difficult to make that look convincing.
Yeah.
It's not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. I just think pulling the tree in, emphasising this trunk from here, excuse me, I think it's a better option on the tree, personally.
Let's just get off what
On it,
we
but
think. It's not going to be needed then.
it's your tree though. You've got to, if you don't want to go down that route and you want to keep that branch or whatever, that's entirely up to you.
Now, I want what's best for the tree, what's going to make... It's not going to be a price tree, but what's going to make a nice image.
There's definitely a good image in this tree, right? So, are you happy to take that
Yeah,
off?
we'll get rid of that.
Right, have you got a pair of big branches?
Yep, so. Or... Look at that.
So what I'll do is I'll... Oh, hang on.
So what would be the aftercare when you're removing branches at this time of year?
Well, it's more to do with aftercare of the entire tree, for me. Now, I know you might think, don't worry about frost at the minute, but I'm afraid you're going to have to worry about frost at the minute because we have actually had some.
Yeah.
So you don't want any major work done to the tree. It's not just about after a repot. Any major work, what I would do is I would protect it from any extremes. So no frost, no extreme wind. I know this is going to be a bit of a laugh, but any extreme sun. And I would often just put it in a slightly more shady spot, sheltered shady spot, just for a few weeks. But over the winter time, I generally protect all of my trees anyway. They're all come into the workshop or under a covered area because the amount of rain we've been getting is just, you know, the trees want to dry out, not just here, but here.
Yeah. Because
obviously needle cast's been an issue over the past couple of years because it's just wet. And so just protect it from extremes. Have you got a greenhouse?
No, I just put my trees in my shed. There's
Right.
plenty of light goes in.
There's still plenty of light in there
Yeah.
because I was going to say the pine and that'll still need.
Yeah, there's plenty of light that goes in.
I know there's a lot of people go, well, trees in the wild don't get this, and trees in the wild, but that's not in the wild, it's in a pot.
Yeah.
This is a conductor of cold and heat. It can actually do quite a lot of damage.
Normally, any that I can't get into shed over big, over winter, get them on ground and a bubbler at the pot,
Right.
just to keep a bit more warmth in there. But I also put a slit in bottom of bubble wrap, so what any water can escape.
Right.
Not everybody's ideal way of doing things like, but
No,
it's
people-
worked for me.
People find their own way of doing things, and if it works for them, that's fine. So you see, I'm taking off some of them branches that are kind of going upwards,
Yeah.
right? And any that are dramatically pointing down. You want foliage pad made up of, you've got your primary branch, that splits off into two, this splits off into two, and then you start to form that foliage pad by laying them base branches out,
Yeah.
right? So each clump of foliage gets its nice amount of light, tipped up to the light buds, and then you use some of the thinner stuff on the inside to form that volume of the foliage pad, right? So remember, don't always automatically chop stuff that's pointing down if there's not an awful lot around, much else around it.
Put into place.
You can put wire on and you can twist things so that you can get it onto the right plane. This branch here is way too long, right? Low and away from this. This is a little bit shorter on this side. I would suggest making a little apex out of that. Right, so you get that nice flow going up like that. Because if you spread that out and make a foliage pad, it's going to be too open. And this stuff here, certainly not at present anyway, isn't kind of long enough.
No.
And that's going to make it very open in there. You could definitely grow it. You have got to remember, growing on and time is a tool too. Don't just automatically go, well, it hasn't got that there, so we can't do that. But you can actually grow things on. And there is a branch here that kind of goes back that way. We can wire and pull around that way. So there's a couple of options to do. But I think, again, this lot here, that definitely needs to come out that way because it's a bit flat here. So we need to pull this out to give you a little bit more slope on the back of the tree there, and spread some of this lot out to the light, pull it around this way, not that way. And again, we might make a little bit of a apex on here, so you've got some little apexes.
So it would be apexes because these are classed as trunks with it being a clump.
But it doesn't have to be.
No, it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. If you think about a group planting, each tree in a group planting doesn't always have an apex. Sometimes you have undulations in the group planting, but a lot of the time it is just one flow because everything's going up to the light. So it depends.
Yeah.
Depends on what air you like and what the tree's offering you. It's reading the tree and letting you move it in that specific direction. So, but I think we should possibly try to make some little apexes on these. I think that's definitely kind of the way to go. Because obviously we've got quite a lot to move around. Even this one here, because it's a bit flat along the top, and we'll drop that down and again and make a little kind of separate tree from that, so you'll have a little bit of undulations going around the tree, and I think that's going to make quite a nice image when it's kind of set. There is some big thick branches on it that we need to kind of hide because we can't chop them off. See, we've got a big thick branch in here, but if we chop that off, I feel like we're going to have a very bare section here. So in a situation like that, it's a fault on the tree that's not great, but let's hide it. And this is the good thing with a lot of conifers is we can hide any of the flaws that the tree might be giving us, and highlight the good points. So, and there's a lot of good points on this as well. So yeah, lots of foliage to play with.
So would you say with it being a clump style as well, you can treat it as one tree or several trees?
Yeah.
Yeah, like a group.
A twin trunk, a clump, group plantings, they can all have either or. You can actually do that with certain single trunks trees if it's got like a branch that comes out here, and sometimes it would start to form a little apex itself here, and then you've got another one up here. It's what the piece of material is kind of saying to you. It's like moving it in that direction. We all have read the books in the past. A lot of us have been doing bonsai a long time. long before the internet came along, and the books always have to say something, of course they do. But a lot of the time in the books, when you were given these styles for bonsai, they're not hard and fast rules, they're just guidelines, and you can break the rules a little bit, but the idea is you learn the guidelines first, and then move things on and do things different. Do you know what I mean? All for trying something a little bit different. As long as the health of the tree is adhered to, you know, you can't turn a tree upside down and as in have the wide part up here and a triangle coming down like that, because the stuff down here is not going to survive because it's been blocked out by light. That's an extreme way of putting it, but this is what I mean. It's just use the guidelines to learn the basics. Once you know the basics and you know how to, you're styling trees, how to read the tree, then break the rules a little bit, do something a bit different. You know, the world is your oyster.
Good. Thank you. Sam?
This wire was already on?
Yeah,
And you think it was wire in Japan?
I'm guessing so.
Right. I think what I would do with this is I would be tempted to take all of this wire off.
I was thinking that anyway.
Yeah, because there is quite a bit crossing over.
Yeah, it's not the best, is it?
No. And just clean it up, get the yellow needles off. I know you were doing that before. So bits of wire off that. You see there's quite a bit biting in at the back there. Clean up and wire off this, right? Champion. I'm working you hard today, aren't I? We'll start to get some of these branches into position. I'll not go crackers simply because often when you put some of these branches into position and you need to get moving to put wire up there, stuff gets knocked about, and it's not good for the tree for branches to go back and forwards, and forwards. So, but we need some get some guy wires.
I've got a load of 0.8 in there.
Right.
And then I've got white or brown.
Because you've got movement in there, right? So it wouldn't make sense for you to have completely straight branches, right? So, and what I do is, as I mentioned before, I lay them base branches out, and then I use the thinner, shorter ones to use as fillers to add that volume into the foliage pad, right? And then just wondering whether or not get a bit of wire on there and twist that round a little bit. Just see if there's any. Push the energy further back onto that, right? And then that'll make these buds here kind of come away a little bit more. So take some of the energy away from these really strong areas and help just kind of push it down. Obviously, again, like what I was saying to Gail before, work the strong areas first, right? So actually do these bits up here. So take out that really strong section there and push the energy to these ones here, right? But just be aware, like, say this branch here, there's a big jump from this to the end of that. Right, now what else have we got there? We've got that one there, but try not to borrow branches.
Right.
In other words, don't bring a branch from round here and pull it round to fit in there, right? Because it just doesn't look very good, and it's going to be a pain to sort out later on. Try and get all of your branch structure done early on. But I mean, this one is in a good place. That one can eventually fill in there, and that can fill in there. And in fact, this side is a little bit long.
Yeah.
It wants to prune. It wants pruning back quite a bit. Right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Brilliant. mass together to make the foliage pattern look a little bit bigger.
So this one's had a good trim.
Bigger into that, a bit of thickness in the branch.
Hi Steve, thank you for Steve.
It does, unfortunately.
It's my tree.
And then,
Got trim for free, excellent.
I know, but look, when you see that can get pulled around into their champion.
So what have you done, Jimmy?
Today,
Yeah.
we've managed to pull that branch forward and across to
Yeah.
hide the big straight part of that branch.
Yep.
So we've managed to
Oh, go on,
hide that.
nice.
I'm now on doing the big pad at the bottom, and that's probably as much as I'll get done today, but it's just setting the tree out on now to finish it off.
Excellent. Did you remove any branches? Or did Kaz
We
hack off
removed-
any
We
branches?
removed quite a few branches from like long straggly ones
Yeah.
because it needed to be pushed further back in, and we managed to do that by just taking them up and reduce the pad size.
What's that?
That's where we cut the branch that was coming
Yeah. You're
across
saying it was
that way,
obscuring
across
it,
the
yeah.
trunk line.
This bit of movement.
Yeah, it looks a lot better. if I'm
Which
honest.
initially it was there to hide that,
Yeah.
but we've managed to hide it with that branch, so that's come out, and like you said, it's opened up the trunk line of the tree a lot better.
Yeah, brilliant.
Because from there,
Well done.
But hopefully,
You were talking about refining it
Ah, right.
by candle pinching next year, is it?
yeah, next year we're doing a little bit of candle pinching on this now. It's at that stage of its development where you want to do candle pinching, otherwise these fine bits of twigs that are developing now, if it's left to grow, fed all season and then cut back in at the end of the summer, which you do on unrefined trees, these are going to get a bit thick, and now we want to kind of start to push the ramification on this a little bit more and get these kind of filled in a little bit. So these branches are not long and gangly like what these trees in development are like. So you only want to produce buds within these kind of vicinities in here. So we'll start to get nice formed, dense foliage mass. The apex you kind of need to maybe fill out a little bit more.
It's
But-
this side of it.
Yeah, but that'll get there pretty quickly. I mean, the pruning, the feeding that you've done, the pruning back that you've done at the right time of the year has got it going really well. So the next stage for this would be carry on feeding now up until I would say we'll start getting what prolonged frosts. I often feed my trees half-strength fertiliser, or the conifers I should say, half-strength fertiliser once a month over the winter. As and when, it's not imperative that you do that, and you will get some people say it's a waste, and there isn't actually any evidence that it does work, but it certainly hasn't done any of my trees any harm. And they always seem to come out of the winter really, really well. So feed up until maybe about November, then go down to the that winter fertiliser half strength over the winter, and then when you see the buds starting to swell, get that fertiliser on again. Let the buds develop and then start snapping accordingly. So preferably you want 2 buds in the end. So if there's any developing with 3 in there now, but I think you've already been in and done some bud selection.
This one there.
There's one there, you've slacked, Sam. Yeah, no. So yeah, knock them down to 2. And then candle pinching in the spring. I would say with this now, maybe stop fertilising around about the mid to the end of April, otherwise you're going to start getting massive needles.
Right.
Right, but that doesn't mean at the end of the growing season, when the needles have matured, about the end of July to the end of August, that you don't want to be getting in and doing some actual scissor pruning on it, because you will still need to do a little bit of that as well, right? And
Get
then,
all that, Dad. Every word of it.
so, and obviously development for the tree, it wants to come forward in the pot a little bit like that. That branch wants to come forward a bit. That one at the back wants to come behind. So there's a little bit of foliage just peeping out where this trunk is, because obviously you can see that trunk. It's just a little bit too, it's a bit too bare. Whereas if you've got a bit of foliage kind of peeping round the corner there, it just takes your eye off that. And obviously that tipping forward makes the apex a little bit in a better position, and it brings it towards you a little bit more. And maybe a couple of the branches here, just drop them down just ever so slightly as well, just to close that gap in at the back. Because remember, the back should be good just as much as the front is. It should work all the way around, but that really nicely developing there. So
the candle pinching is usually for a tree that is already sort of quite mature and refined, is that right?
pretty much, because if you've got a pine that has, it's a piece of raw material and it's got long gangly branches that we often get with pine raw material, candle pinching it, you're only going to get buds within the vicinity near the end. If you want buds right the way back on older wood, candle pinching is not going to do that. It's only going to, that's only going to be able to be done by getting some real vigour into the tree by feeding it and letting it grow, not by restricting its growth, but growth by snapping the candles out, but by letting it grow really vigorously through the growing season. And then come to the back end of the summer when the growth has stopped, the needles have matured, the new buds are starting to form in the end. It's then you come in with scissors and prune out branches that you don't want and prune back summer growth. So actually getting rid of the bud in the end, but you must do it before the bud gets too big in the end, so you don't waste the tree's energy too much. And you come in and you prune back this summer's growth, leaving approximately half a dozen needles on the end, and then you're going to get buds in this vicinity here rather than just within this vicinity here. And for a tree that you're needing to move on from raw material, that is how you're going to do it, to push that back. You see all of these pines that have been used as demonstration trees, because obviously you want to set an image for it, and of what I call spaghetti-fied, the branch, where you twist the branch in. Again, it's not meant to stay like that. It is never, that is not the idea. It is never meant to stay with these twisted in branches. That is just to give a general image of how the tree is going to be finished. Over time, you need to let the tree grow and cut it back, and let it grow and cut it back, and get buds further back and pull out that spaghettification, so you get nice, tight growth on shorter branches later on. So generally that's how you kind of work your pines.